Hello and welcome. I'm Steph, the head of content strategy here at Moving to Canada, and I have my colleague Rebecca with me here to help today.
Hey everyone.
Rebecca just finished drafting and we just published a piece covering the National Occupational Classification Codes. That's a mouthful, so we'll refer to it as NOC codes in the rest of this recording. And when I was reading it, it made me wonder about what my NOC code might be if I were applying for Express Entry today and how I would go about the process of finding it. So I asked Rebecca to join me today to walk through what the process does look like so that we can explore through me what this process might look like for anyone interested in finding their own NOC. Rebecca, could you walk us through why you're the right person for the job here?
I am a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. I've got 15 years of experience in working with Canadian immigration applications, predominantly in economic class immigration. So I've dealt with a lot of NOC codes, a lot of work reference letters, and matching those up.
Awesome. I'm definitely in capable hands. Before we dig into the rest of the content, just the usual disclaimer that this is not immigration advice for anybody listening, probably not even for me, but we're just exploring this for informational purposes. At this point, your overall question might be what a NOC is. For immigration purposes, IRCC uses a 5-digit NOC code that's related to your work experience, and they use that code to determine whether your work experience counts as skilled work for immigration purposes. Your NOC code affects some pretty significant things in Canadian immigration, whether your work experience is skilled, whether it meets eligibility requirements for certain programs, and if the experience you have can even be used to claim CRS points for Express Entry. With that out the way, I wanted to note that this topic really sparked my interest for two reasons. The first is that I've been seeing a lot more people within our community and more broadly online commenting that they're either concerned that the NOC they've chosen isn't going to pass scrutiny at IRCC, or worse, they've actually had their application refused because the IRCC officer decided that the NOC code didn't match up to their actual duties. And the second reason this interested me was because when I search my job title, nothing comes up for that NOC. So it had me really wondering about what the process should look like for people who are currently applying or considering applying in the future. Rebecca, could you talk us through why choosing the right NOC code is such a big deal?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, the NOC code really does affect a wide variety of things when it comes to your immigration application, and it is one of the most important factors when considering eligibility for many different economic immigration programs, like the Federal Skilled Worker Program and the Canadian Experience Class. An applicant has to do two things when they select and prove an NOC code. They have to pick and declare an NOC code that closely matches their claimed work experience. If they say, I'm a software engineer, I'm claiming points for 3 years of being a software engineer, they have to select the right NOC code for that occupation, and then they need to demonstrate through supporting documents that they have performed the role and the duties associated with that NOC code being claimed. Both steps are equally important. So selecting the correct code without properly documenting it or demonstrating the work without selecting the right code, both can lead to complications and an eventual refusal if you're not able to overcome them.
So that leads me to how to choose the right NOC. It's obviously so crucially important, but as I found out, it's not super easy to do. When I checked my job title, nothing came up. Head of Content Strategy is the title that we use for my work, but IRCC, or the NOC system that they use, doesn't have a Head of Content Strategy box. What would my next step be when it comes to finding my own NOC?
Every immigration practitioner has their own approach. When searching for possible NOC codes, I like to go really broad and then narrow down. Start with making a list of your actual duties. So write down your day-to-day duties, focus on your core responsibilities rather than your job title. And this really shouldn't be a rushed exercise. Really do take the time to reflect on what you do. I then would use the ESDC official NOC finder to generate options. You enter your job title, enter key terms that you've come up with from making those list of duties to generate a list of possible NOC codes. Review each potential NOC code individually. Assess the lead statement first. If the lead statement doesn't clearly reflect the essence of your role or the organization that you work for, move on to the next NOC code. Compare the duties carefully. You need to really compare the responsibilities listed to what you did with your own list, and you're looking for at least 70% alignment with a particular emphasis on duties listed near the top. So the duties listed near the top are generally considered more important for the NOC code. You'll notice within an NOC code you have job titles, example titles, and employment requirements. These are not generally used to determine your eligibility, but I always use them as a sanity check. Job titles and employment should be used as a secondary check to make sure that nothing's quite crazy out there. And also, you can't review any NOC code without reviewing reviewing the exclusions. So at the bottom, you'll have a list of exclusions of each NOC code. And so you should review all those NOC codes that appear as exclusions because they might be similar to the role. You have to be confident that the duties you've come up with accurately reflect your role and that your employer will be able and willing to confirm those duties in a reference letter.
Okay, that makes sense. I had the benefit of having all of this laid out in the article that we'd just published when I did this task for myself. And when I did it, I landed on two possible options. The first is 1022, advertising, marketing, and public relations managers, and 11202, which is professional occupations in advertising. My job title, I think, aligns more with the first one, the advertising manager NOC. And that type of work certainly takes up a good portion of my day. But the reality is that we are a really small team, and I'm still in the weeds with creating content for moving to Canada most days of the week. I would guess that aligns more with the 70% of my work requirement if I average it out over the entire year. Which one should I choose? Because the middle management one obviously seems a little bit more impressive on paper, right?
It's really interesting because for PR applications, unless you're targeted for that occupation, won't impact your immigration application so long as both are skilled. Impressive on paper is important, absolutely, but you really want to go into the NOC code that you feel most confident about. Again, go with the one that feels like it suits your day-to-day the most. So in your case, a common word that I found when I was reviewing your duties in my head was content. So that's literally where I started. I put in, under job title, I put in content. And that generated a list of NOC codes, and I think it generated a list of 5 or 6 NOC codes. The first one that came up was a technical writer. I looked at that, didn't think it was appropriate. I then went to author, and I thought that was a contender because it does cover the web content aspect of your role, but it doesn't necessarily cover the strategy component. I did also read journalist and editor, but I wasn't expecting a match there. But again, I wanted to cover my basis. I then did look at 11202, and I think maybe I have a bit of bias when it comes to 11202, but I view that NOC code as a catch-all NOC code, which just means that it's super broad in scope. So it covers many marketing, PR, and advertising roles. And all of those require different skills and experience and duties. And so I think when you've got a catch-all NOC code, it's really hard to hone in on exactly what IRCC are looking at unless you know what to feed into your reference letter. So at this point, I was caught between author as a web content specialist and 11202. In any event, when there is any type of supervision or decision-making involved in your responsibilities, it's always prudent to look at those managerial roles. So like you said, on paper, your title is head of content strategy. So if you're looking at the title exclusively, then you would go for the managerial role, but you really have to look at the duties. Whenever there's a managerial aspect or a supervision aspect, coordination aspect, decision-making involved in your job, you always want to review the managerial NOC that covers that role. The marketing manager, if you have a look, has one duty, which can potentially be broken up into subtasks, but there's still really not much to work on in terms of crafting a reference letter around those tiny amounts of duties. So it leaves a lot of room for discretion. Unless I was absolutely certain that 10022 was appropriate, I think a best bet for you would be 11202. Looking at the duties, you can make them more applicable and still add some kind of coordination in there.
There is a lot to consider. In my case, it seems like it would very much come down to what the reference letter would be able to cover and how closely we can get that to align with either of those NOC codes. Would you mind just walking us through some high-level tips about reference letters in particular?
So the reference letter is the primary document IRCC is going to use to make sure that you actually performed the duties listed in the NOC you selected. An effective reference letter will describe the role as it existed in the workplace, not how it's written in the NOC. So you're never going to repeat the duties that appear in the NOC. That's an absolute no-go. You have to put it in your own language. You have to use employer-specific language rather than generic wording to explain how your work was carried out in your workplace, including system used, scale of the work, who you worked with. Make it really applicable to your industry, your actual job, without going too technical. So there's a fine line between being technical and being able to have anyone understand your job. So you have to strike that balance. Again, you do have to show clear alignment to the NOC code duties without repeating them. A tip that's often overlooked is include just the regular day-to-day duties that may seem obvious for any occupation. Don't assume that IRCC will infer the basic responsibilities that come with your role. They should be explicitly listed, so there's no kind of guesswork there. A common misconception is that the reference letter should state the NOC code itself. It's not necessary and can actually be counterproductive. An ideal reference letter would allow the processing officer to easily match the duties listed with the NOC code claimed without specifically saying, I'm prepared preparing this reference letter under NOC code XXXX. Also, in addition to reference letters being a fundamental document, IRCC may also do their own due diligence and review publicly available information to assess the credibility of the work claimed in your profile, company websites and stuff. You do just want to make sure that information that's available is consistent across the board. If they do a search, they're not going to find anything that's totally out of ordinary from what they would expect from your reference letter. But in some cases, seeking professional guidance is appropriate to help determine the appropriate NOC code and how to effectively communicate that NOC code.
This is one area actually where we would really caution you against using ChatGPT as an immigration advisor. Generally, that's a good idea anyway, but in this case, like, really do not use ChatGPT. We took a quick look at what it would suggest for my NOC code, and it suggested the NOC 0124, which is actually a NOC code from 2016. It's been replaced and would 100% not be accepted by IRCC today. So it was dangerously wrong.
A point well made.
Thank you so much for walking through that with me. I really hope that this example helps demonstrate just how complex it can be to choose your own NOC code. If you are not 100% certain what your NOC code should be, considering getting advice from a qualified immigration professional could be money well spent.
If there's any element of doubt, if you have any complicated background, if you have changed your NOC code, it's always worth looking for immigration advice just to make sure that that's managed properly.
Definitely. With that out the way, I did mention that Rebecca published an article covering her full process, as well as a lot of other helpful tips for finding your NOC in 2026. If you would like to receive content like that directly into your inbox, we encourage you to join our community. It's super easy. Just head on over to the web link on the page and you can enter your email there. You'll join our community of over 170,000 other people who get these tips, and you'll be in the loop about everything that's happening in Canadian immigration. Plus, you'll get a bunch of settlement resources that help you with everything from newcomer finances to boosting your career once you're in Canada. So we would love to see you there. Have a great day. Bye.